Let's look at the Gospel of Mark, just a few moments with the story of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. Maybe lessons from the life of Jesus. I'm going to start out from the very beginning of Mark chapter 1, verse 1. This is the good news or the gospel about Jesus the Messiah, the Son of God. The story of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark is authored by the person we know in the New Testament as John Mark. He had a close connection with Peter. So a lot of people feel that Peter told or related a lot of these stories in the Gospel of Mark to John Mark, who wrote them down. And so you're actually getting Peter's gospel through the eyes and the pen of John Mark. Matter of fact, Mark is the first and earliest gospel. And the word gospel just simply means good news, the good news of Jesus. And it was written about 58 or 60 AD, only about 25, 27 years after Jesus' death. Now, let me share a few thoughts about the gospel as a whole. The gospel story of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark is a substantiated gospel. By that I mean that it was written at a time when people were around that could verify the facts. Many eyewitnesses were still living when Mark wrote his gospel. So it wasn't fanciful tales, it wasn't fanciful stories. It was eye account witnesses that could verify what Mark was writing. So it's a substantiated gospel, but it's also the shortest gospel. Mark doesn't start at the nativity, the birth of Christ. He starts with John the Baptist and the public ministry of Jesus. And it's only 16 chapters long, and most of those chapters deal with his death and resurrection. So it's the shortest gospel that we have. The four gospels, of course, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Mark being the shortest. It's not only a substantiated gospel and the shortest gospel, but it's a swift gospel. By that I mean it's full of action. Some versions use the word immediately. This happened, that happened. Some gospels say, then this happened, then that happened. It's one action event after another. Some gospels, translations, they use the word at once. At once they did this. At once this happened. And so it's a very swift gospel. There's not a lot of extra stuff in the Gospel of Mark. It's one story after another of Jesus's last 3 years living here upon this earth. So it's a substantiated gospel. It's the shortest gospel. It's a swift, moving, action-packed gospel. But it's also a supernatural gospel. By that I mean there are miracles throughout the book of Mark. And like I said, because there were eyewitnesses, these miracles were verified by those who were around at that time and those who saw. Matter of fact, Mark may have seen some of these very miracles himself. And of course, the work and the life of Jesus Christ in the heart of every believer is a miracle of transformation. The good news of Christ moving into the heart of a believer, changing us from the inside out. Mark chapter 1, verse 1. It is good news.